Before we begin, thank you very much to Chris Carnage for joining the Patreon campaign. The most pro wrestling name I have heard from my Patreon shoutouts in quite a while. Welcome. Hope you enjoy your stay. Thank you very much for keeping my channel alive. I do appreciate it. So I'm going to tell you guys right now, as of this moment, I don't know if I'm going to make a full video on the 25th. I'm probably going to do my Christmas haul. But I need to do the wrap up for the advent calendars as well. So 25th is still going to be a double video day, most likely. And then on the 26th, since we're doing the holiday thing on the 25th, and that's on a Monday, news roundup is going to be on Tuesday, probably going to be a light one. And then I might ride out the rest of the year just doing reviews of the new United toys. Because honestly, I need a bit of a break just from coming up with new video ideas. And then, we'll get into that again once we hit the new year. But that's the plan right now. The plan for right now, this moment, is to actually talk about how terrible Autobots are at disguising themselves. So this came up in my Twitter feed a little bit ago, and this is a classic example. So in Transformer Cybertron, Optimus Prime actually scolds Scattershot for choosing a tank for an alt mode when they are trying to disguise themselves on Earth. Remember, in Cybertron, they are refugees. Cybertron is gone for the moment, so they are hiding out on Earth until they can restore it / find a new home, etc. So they're trying to stay under the radar in the show. They're actually doing the robots in disguise thing. But Optimus actually brings up the point. Why'd you pick a tank? And Scattershot correctly fires back, why'd you pick a fire truck with cannons? Okay, fair point. But it does raise the old adage of, you know what? This silly thing of robots in disguise doesn't last very long. The Autobots in particular are not especially good at choosing their alt modes to remain inconspicuous. So let's go over a few. Now, to start with, I'm going to defend Scattershot just a little bit. We can talk a little bit of Warpath here and actually explain that, in actuality, it's perfectly legal for an American citizen to own a tank, which is the point where my foreign viewers are going, wait, really? Oh, wait, America, right. It's not like that, though. They have to be completely demilitarized. They have to be completely disarmed, and you can only drive them on your own private property. So it's not like I can take my tank fully armed with a shell ready to go into 5 o'clock traffic. I mean, it'll make the commute easier, certainly. Insurance company will hate it. But no, it's not that. You can't do that with a privately owned tank. So Scattershot's not entirely wrong. Maybe you don't pick a tank with 2 live warheads strapped to the top, but you know what? Fine. And he's not the worst, obviously. We have low-hanging fruit amongst the Autobots. Of course, there's the Dinobots. I love how fictionally everyone tries to justify why the Dinobots exist in different ways. Okay, they actually woke up during prehistoric times and took forms based on the local animals, and then they've been in stasis lock until 1984 or 1985. Okay, nice. They were museum exhibits converted into Transformers. Thank you, Transformers Animated. You had an idea there. But it's always funny to me, like, how do you justify robots in disguise, big metal T-Rex? Obviously, this one is not disguising very much. He's not the worst offender, though. You know who the worst offender is. Because at least T-Rexes existed at one time. Yeah, yeah. Unless you're in a Smithsonian museum for fictional material, you're not going to see anything that looks like Cosmos, who is obviously designed after, like, one of those old sci-fi movie, pie plate flying saucers. He doesn't need to disguise fictionally because he spends most of his time orbiting Earth. Okay, fine. But still, he's called a robot in disguise. This is the low-hanging fruit. We're not really discussing them. We are kind of discussing the Autobots that kind of took it upon themselves to come up with things that absolutely, positively are not disguising themselves well. We'll start in the realm of custom vehicles, and we start that with Bumblebee. So, if all the other Autobots are scaled to real-world vehicles, we have to believe that the Volkswagen Beetle that Bumblebee scanned in had to be some kind of custom, because that's not what a Volkswagen looks like. In reality, it's because the toy is based on a penny racer, or Chorokyu toys in Japan, where they have these huge rear wheels so they can do wheelies if you put a penny behind them. But that also meant that they had a very squat and very cutesy aesthetic. That's how that toy line went. Bumblebee, Cliffjumper, and Bumper all follow that same design aesthetic. So technically all of them, I mean, fictionally, would be based on custom cars that people did, and would likely be one-offs that they have copied somehow. Also potentially a one-off is Sunstreaker. Now, Lamborghini, fine, right? I can accept that you scanned a Lamborghini Countach. But, you know what? They didn't come with an exposed rear engine. That's not a thing that the Lamborghini had. Someone had to add that in. Someone had to show off how big their engine was in their super expensive sports car. You know what? Fair play to them. If you can afford a Lamborghini, fine, do whatever you want to it. I don't think you need to show off any more than that, but hey, you do you. And this is a common one. Like, if you want to see a real Lamborghini, if you want to see what an actual Lamborghini looks like in Transformers, look at his brother, look at Sideswipe. That's an actual Lamborghini. But that also means that we can look at the other Lamborghini in the G1 line, and that's, well, for the Autobot side, that's going to be Red Alert. This is one of those, like, moments of hilarity that everyone just kind of went, ha, we get it. Because this is, again, ridiculous. Now, police enforcement actually does use supercars in their fleet. They're usually confiscated. They're usually vehicles that became police property after usually like some high-end crime bust, something, like drug dealers and things like that who have like big show-offy cars. And gee, I wonder how you guessed what the crimes they were committing. But not the fire department. The fire department doesn't keep the Lamborghinis from a crime scene. Especially not one that is branded exclusively for the fire chief himself. Now, fire chiefs make decent money, but they don't make Lamborghini money. They don't make custom Lamborghini monkey money. Sorry. It's been a long day. But no, to have that, like, I've never met a fire chief that made this much money. Ever. And this one is absurd. Now, like I said, the police force actually does keep supercars. They use them as pursuit vehicles, by the way. So like high-speed crimes or like highway patrol, yeah, you might actually see a Lamborghini done up with police lights and logos. You will not, however, if you are, unless you are in Japan, see a police car that looks like Prowl. Because somehow, despite being in America, Prowl managed to copy a police car decoed exclusively for Japan. Because here in America, cop cars all just kind of have, like they all kind of just do their own thing depending on what branch of police enforcement that they are part of. Highway patrol will have different colored than beat cops or like in the city kind of police cars. So you can kind of tell them apart. So one car might be white and brown, one might be white and green. Traditional police cars in America are white and blue, but they're basically just whatever. In Japan, police cars pretty much keep this color scheme, and they still use it today. So somehow he found a Fairlady Z in America that was done up like a Japanese police car. You know what? Good for him. Good for him. We can also talk about his mold brother, which would be Smokescreen. So he's still a Datsun 280ZX. All right, so fine. I mean, it's a Japanese car, but imports exist. Someone in America could actually own a Datsun. Well, this specific Datsuns. I'm not going off on that. But the fact is, now we are entering a particular area of G1 Autobots who thought it was a brilliant idea to imitate race cars in order to disguise themselves amongst the public. So this is based on a car by Electromotive Devendorf, if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not a race guy. Point being, this is a specific car. There's only two of them. That's what's good. It gets me so much about these. There's only two. There's a 38 and an 83, and that's it. There are two cars. So he's now the third of that car that exists. Great disguise, smokescreen. And you know the weird thing about this is he's actually not the first one to do this. He saw the mistake his Autobot friends made and went, I want to be that level of stupid with my alt mode. But we can go further. We go all the way to the Autobot's second in command, Jazz. Jazz thought it would be a great idea to copy a Porsche 935 Turbo. And you know what? Fine. It's a cool vehicle. It's a very fast vehicle. It works. All right, I will give you that. However, you just happened to copy a one that is full of racing decals and the number 4, which means you are a very, very specific Porsche. Specifically, you're one that won a circuit of a major race in 1976. So amongst car buffs and people who would recognize a Porsche 935 Turbo, they would know exactly which one you were. And they probably know you shouldn't be wherever you are at that moment. You know, it's that kind of like brain dead. Granted, they're alien robots. They probably don't even know what, touring racing is. So, granted, they're coming from an inexperienced place, especially if you take the context of the Generation 1 cartoon into mind. They just came back online. They haven't had time to study the planet. They haven't met any of its inhabitants yet. Spike and Chip are not there to go, that's a really stupid idea, Optimus Prime. You're going to get spotted immediately. Everyone's going to know that's really out of place. We hadn't gotten to that point yet. They just came out of stasis lock. So, okay. I'm not my best when I wake up first thing in the morning, and that's only with about 7 hours sleep. Am I kidding? I'm lucky to get 6. But no. It's not the... I'll give it to them. They were asleep for like 4 million years. They weren't thinking yet. You know who should have been thinking? The smart one on the team. The smart one on the team should have been thinking of this. He is a Lancia Stratos Turbo. Now, okay. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt here. There's about 500 of those. Okay? There's about 500, somewhere around 500 were actually made. So to actually have and be a Stratos Turbo, then, okay, fine. It is entirely possible he found someone in the area that owned one. However, once again, it's racing decals that give it away. This is specifically the Group 5 Stratos. It's a famous racer. It's not something that should be out on a street. Keep in mind, there's a lot of like racing cars that are modified specifically to work on tracks and reach speeds far, far higher than the cars are normally rated for. And a lot of times they have been modified, which makes them street illegal. So on top of the fact that these vehicles are usually very, very specific or even one of a kind, they're also usually the type that would not be allowed on a normal road that the Autobots were always on. So yeah. But even assuming that someone actually found, they actually found a Stratos Turbo, keep in mind, just to let you know, in 1970 when they were first produced, they cost about $65,000. In today money, that's over $500,000. That's how expensive these cars were. So the odds that he found someone who actually owned one and is such a fan of the race version that he copied it all the way down to the sponsor decals is a little far-fetched. Just a little far-fetched. not the Pokemon. And of course, the most egregious one has to go to Mirage. He at least can turn invisible, so there's that. However, not only is he, again, he is a famous race car. He is a Ligier JS11 F1 car. F1 cars are absolutely not street legal. This is why they go to the racetrack in the back of a semi-truck, and they don't just drive there. They can't drive on a road legally, and yet here is Mirage, with the specific decals and everything. Oh, but he misspelled a few. He took the sponsor labels and misspelled a few to kind of throw people off. Okay, smart thinking there. That'll confuse them. That'll throw them off. Ignore the fact you're a one-of-a-kind car. Now, the race cars are probably some of the most egregious examples of this. They're not the only ones. People who actually know what they're talking about or know what they're looking at are also going to have some suspicions if they see an Autobot on the road. Inferno, for instance. It's a Mitsubishi Fuso F-Series FT, which is to say, it's a brand of fire truck that is almost exclusive to Japan. Now, here's the thing. Him and Hotspot both use vehicles like this. They both use Mitsubishi trucks. But every now and then, there were exports. There are models of these particular trucks that were actually sent to the U.S. and are associated with the U.S. Now, my research didn't really pan out what year they were active, or if any were actually used for fire trucks, because apparently they use this model of truck for a lot of things. And in fact, Inferno himself is kind of weird. The photos that I found, I found photos of the real vehicles where there were 2 wheels in front and only 1 set of wheels in the back, and then another one that just had 4 wheels. It was weird. So this might be specifically modified model that is only to Inferno. Or again, he copied a customized vehicle. I don't know. Here's another weird one. We'll go aerial this time. Silverbolt is a Concorde SST. Once again, we are talking about a very rare vehicle. Only about 20 of them were actually made, and most of them only flew in Europe because for years they were banned in the US because it is a supersonic passenger jet. They cause sonic booms, which meant they couldn't really be flown around certain areas, and a lot of people did not want to, like, an airport. Anyone living near an airport didn't want to have to deal with a sonic boom every single time this plane landed or took off. So, you know what? I get that. I get that. Yeah, they also have a long history of like how limited use they were. Usually, if they were in the U.S., it was only on the East Coast. There was only one coastal producer of these, and they went under in 1980. So, yeah. Yeah, mostly because no one wanted to fly it because it sounded like a death machine. It sounded like a death trap. No, you want a death trap? We have to talk about Ratchet and Ironhide. Okay, so once again, we're dealing with a vehicle that only exists in Japan. It's a Nissan Sunny Vanette Coach SG. So this vehicle is not nearly big enough to use as an ambulance. You might be able to have someone laying down in the back, but you do not have room for paramedics, and you certainly don't have room for the equipment back there. But it's a van, so they made it an ambulance. Okay, we just kind of play pretend on that one. With Ironhide, you don't really have much excuse. It's just a vehicle that didn't come to the U.S. But again, imports exist. And then, yeah, there actually was a release of this vehicle in the United States. The problem is it was only in 1986, which means it was 2 years too late to make Ironhide make sense. Now, the fun part about this vehicle that I found out is that on top of the fact that it was limited, it wasn't really that widespread in the US, they were heavily recalled. In fact, they took an unprecedented step, and not only did they recall the vehicle, the company actually offered everyone the Kelley Blue Book value to buy it back. Why? Because over 100 of them caught fire. This thing is a literal death trap. And we made an ambulance out of it. So, we're going to leave it off of that. For things that are supposed to be robots in disguise, Transformers just has this long history of using vehicles that are very, very specific, very, very limited, or even famous vehicles that really should not be on the road. So, yeah, granted, you might have to be a car or racing expert to spot it, but, yeah, there's a lot of this going on. So, that's what I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this weird look at Transformers and the Autobots' failure to hide themselves. It was kind of fun to research, too. So, thank you, everyone, for watching. I will see you next time.
We parlay with the captain.
You think a werecroc is going to listen to elvish rules of piracy?
Of course it would be the freaking elves that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.